When Calls the Heart, Season 8, Episode 6. The show opens up with Florence sitting by Ned's bedside. Carson and Faith are second-guessing not taking Ned to Union City. Carson and Faith are trying to diagnose Ned. Carson finally said, one way or the other, we're going to have to operate. There's no way to avoid it. Florence and Molly were sitting at a table in the clinic. Joseph came in and asked Florence if he could hold a prayer vigil for Ned. She said, "Thank you, that would be lovely." Lucas and Elizabeth were sitting in the saloon. He told her that with her advice, Mom convinced his father to come home. He told Elizabeth she was incredible, and he hoped she knew how happy he was to have her in his life, and held her hand. And she took her hand back from him and said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Of course." Joseph came to the saloon to ask Elizabeth if it was okay for him to use the school/church for the visual for Ned. Elizabeth said, "Of course, I'll walk you over." It was raining, so Lucas volunteered to walk with Joseph over there. Nathan and Bill were wrapping up signing papers for Allie's adoption. As he was walking out, he saw Elizabeth sitting at the table by herself. He asked if she would like to be at the adoption ceremony tomorrow. She said she would love to. When Lucas came back, Elizabeth borrowed Lucas's umbrella so she can go to the clinic and check on Ned. When she got there, Molly and Florence were standing together. Molly told her that Carson was going to operate on Ned to make sure that his gallbladder was the problem. Carson called Molly away. Florence said, "I'm not ready for this. Will you come with me?" Elizabeth said, "Of course," and they walked to Ned's bedside. Florence sat down and held Ned's hand. He opened his eyes and said, "Florence?" She said, "Yes, you have to get better." He said, "Oh, I'll be fine. I promise." She gave him a forced smile. He said, "Now when I'm back on my feet, I was wondering, will you marry me?" Florence, Molly, and Elizabeth looked at each other. Florence looked back at Ned and said, "You just think about getting well." Ned said, "Florence, please marry me." She said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Never more so." She smiled, looked back at Molly and Elizabeth, and back at Ned. And while laughing, she said, "Yes, I'll marry you." Faith was knocked out on the cart. Carson put his doctor's coat over her and went outside to sit on the porch. Elizabeth passed by and asked how the operation went. He said, "We did all we could, and I'm not sure if that's enough." Elizabeth said, "Oh, Carson, I hope you know how much we appreciate you here." He said, "Thank you." Allie was in the jail racking a can over the bars saying, "Let me out. I'm innocent. You gotta believe me." Nathan yelled, "Pipe down in there." She said, "That's not very nice." Nathan said, "Right now you're the one not being very nice. Looking over your guest list for the adoption ceremony, seems like you left somebody off." She left Elizabeth off the list because she likes Lucas. Nathan said, "Miss Thornton's happy. Isn't that what we want for people we care about?" Allie said, "She should care about you and me." Nathan said, "She does care about us. That's why I would like you to reconsider adding her to the guest list." She said, "Yes, sir. I don't have to invite Mr. Bouchard, do I?" Nathan said, "Well, if you don't want to invite him, that's fine." Jesse came into the cafe and Clara treated him like a regular customer, even though she wanted to ask him to come home. Because Joseph and Jesse has gotten so close, Clara went to visit Joseph and asked for his advice on what she should do about Jesse. He told her to ask Jesse to come home. There is no way for God, you, or Jesse to repair your marriage if he doesn't come home. And don't talk about money. Just enjoy each other. Talking about money will come later. Lucas was telling a joke. Lee and Bill didn't find it funny. Lucas asked Lee about his pocket watch. Has he found it yet, and how long has it been missing? Lee said, no, I haven't found it, and it's been missing a week. Lucas said he'd keep an eye out for it. Earlier that day, Lee went to the jail and asked Bill, had he found it? Did somebody turn it in? Bill looked in the lost and found drawer, and it wasn't there. After he left Bill and Lee, Lucas went to Christopher's room and asked him if he knew anything about a missing pocket watch. Earlier that day, Christopher was at the oil field, and Lucas must have noticed that he had a pocket watch. I believe Christopher is feeling himself. Lucas told him, I hope your room accommodations are to your liking. Christopher told him, my room is too small. Well, going back to the missing pocket watch, Christopher told him, no, and why are you asking me? Lucas said, I thought maybe you may have happened to cross it somewhere. He said, gee, I'll keep my eyes open. As Lucas was walking out the room, Christopher said, hey, have you found me another room yet? Lucas closed the door back and said, if I find you are picking pockets, if I find out you're picking pockets, I don't care who you are or why you're here, you'll be on the next stage out of town. Understand? Christopher stood up and said, I didn't steal any watch. Lucas said, and I should believe you. Christopher said, that's your choice. Lucas turned and walked out. Christopher took the watch out of his pocket and read the inscription, counting the minutes until we're together again. Many walked into the church and called Joseph's name. Joseph said, yes, Lord? Many laughed and said, you're too much. You know that? They began to talk about him running from his calling. He said he wanted to do other things. She said those other things may need to wait. Elizabeth was sitting on the bench and Nathan rode up. He asked if she was cold and she said she was fine. He grabbed the blanket off his horse and put it around her shoulders anyway. She said, I said I was fine. He said, sure. And he looked at her until she said, thank you, that is better. He said, I used to think it was me that you didn't like. I'm starting to realize it might be you're just headstrong. She said, very funny. You know that isn't true, right? He said, what part exactly? She laughed and shook her head. Nathan said, adopting Allie is the single best thing I've done with my life. He said he'll never understand why his sister married Dylan Parks and how after she passed, he could run out and leave Allie. Elizabeth asked, haven't you ever lost someone so close to your heart that it tears you apart? As she was saying this, she was looking straight ahead. Nathan turned to look at her, and she looked at him. He said, not yet. Elizabeth turned away awkwardly. Nathan said good night and got up and walked away. They found the car that Christopher abandoned. Nathan was following them into town. He stopped to speak with Elizabeth. He saw that she had received her invitation to the ceremony, the adoption ceremony. The people with the car begged for Nathan, and he excused himself and rode away. Lucas walked up and asked if she would like to go for a ride with him. She said if it's to my house, because I would like to spend a little time with Jack. He had a gift in his hand for the future father and daughter-to-be ceremony. She said, Lucas, you are so thoughtful. I don't want you to have any secret sorrows. I want you to share all your joys and sorrows, both privately and publicly. So I'm hoping that you, rather than going for a ride, you might walk me home. She took his hand and they started walking. Where anybody could see them. Could this be PDA? Could she not care if people see them? Florence was sitting by Ned's bedside praying. Ned woke up and looked at her smiling. He said, hi. She said, hi, and got on her knees. He said, you are a beautiful sight. She said, so are you. Ned said, I know I had a high fever and all, but did I ask you to marry me? Florence said, yes, you did. And did you say yes? She said, "I did." He smiled and said, "Good." Bill, Nathan, and Allie were wondering where everyone was. It was time for the adoption ceremony. Elizabeth walked in and Allie said, "Hello," took the gift she had and put it on the table, grabbed Elizabeth's and Nathan's hands, and said, "Judge Avery, we can start now. Everyone's here." Bill looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Elizabeth. Elizabeth looked at Nathan, and the show went off.